So, you want to own a car rental company. Buy a fleet of cars, rent them out by the day, collect the cash every time someone needs a ride from the airport. A car is a car, the logic goes. Buy low, rent often, and sell before it gets old. But as I always say, it is not that simple. What's actually eating more than a quarter of every dollar of revenue before a single customer signs a rental agreement? Why did one of the biggest names in this industry file for bankruptcy overnight in 2020 despite a fleet worth billions of dollars? And why did a bet on the future of the car itself nearly blow a hole through that same company's finances just 3 years later? Let's start with the size of the business. The U.S. car rental industry generated about $40.6 billion in revenue in 2025, running roughly 2.45 million vehicles. And operators bought 1.16 million new cars that year just to keep the fleets fresh. Revenue per unit, the industry's core productivity number, came in around $1,379 a month per car in 2025, actually down slightly from $1,427 the year before. Here's what most people miss. A car rental company isn't really a transportation business. It's a depreciation business that happens to rent cars while it waits to sell them. Depreciation eats close to 28% of every dollar of revenue industry-wide, roughly double the rate seen in the broader real estate and equipment leasing sector. The car is a wasting asset from the moment it's driven off the lot, and a rental company runs that asset harder, with more drivers and more short trips than almost any other owner would. There are two ways companies manage that risk, and the difference matters enormously. A risk vehicle is one the company just owns outright, betting on its own judgment about what the car will be worth when it's time to sell. A program, or repurchase, vehicle is bought under a deal with the manufacturer that guarantees a fixed buyback price on a set date, months or years in advance, shifting the depreciation risk back onto the car maker in exchange for the rental company committing to buy in bulk, typically at least 500 units a year. Program deals are safer. They're also not available to smaller operators, and manufacturers price them to make sure they get the cars back, not to hand out free insurance. Watch what happens when a company leans hard into risk vehicles and bets wrong. In October 2021, Hertz announced a $4.2 billion deal to buy 100,000 Teslas, positioning itself as the industry's electric vehicle pioneer. The timing looked brilliant at first. A global chip shortage had already sent used car values soaring, and in 2022, Hertz actually posted a $1.1 billion gain on vehicle disposals, selling cars for more than they were worth on the books. Then, the used EV market fell apart. High repair costs, rapid depreciation, and weaker than expected rental demand for EVs turned the bet sour. By 2023, that disposal gain had flipped to a loss. By 2024, Hertz was booking a $673 million loss on vehicles sold. Its total vehicle depreciation had jumped to $2.9 billion from $1.8 billion just 2 years earlier. And the company had taken on more than $2 billion in cumulative losses tied to the EV fleet alone, forcing out the CEO who'd championed the deal. Same fleet strategy, same company, and the difference between a billion-dollar windfall and a multi-billion-dollar write-down came down entirely to which direction used car prices moved. Then there's a cost almost nobody outside the industry knows exists: airport concession fees. To operate a counter at a major airport, rental companies typically hand over 8% to 15% of their gross revenue from that location, plus a separate daily facility charge, sometimes with a minimum guaranteed payment built into the contract, regardless of how business goes. It's functionally a landlord's cut on every single rental, which is exactly why off-airport locations, Enterprise's traditional stronghold, can consistently undercut the airport counters on price. The airport isn't renting you a parking spot. It's taking a percentage of your top line just for letting you stand there. Now put fixed fleet debt next to a demand shock, and you get the industry's most dramatic collapse. When COVID hit in March 2020, travel demand didn't slow down. It fell off a cliff overnight. Hertz filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy that May with just $1 billion in cash on hand. But here's the mechanism that made it so violent. The fleet itself had been financed through special vehicle financing subsidiaries, structured almost like mortgage-backed securities that sat legally separate from the main company and kept demanding payment regardless of how many cars we're actually renting. Bankruptcy court orders forced Hertz to dispose of roughly 198,000 leased vehicles between June and December of 2020 alone, then ordered another 121,510 vehicles disposed of by September 2021 with proceeds from every sale required by law to flow straight to the vehicle debt, not into keeping the business running. The company wasn't unprofitable because people stopped needing cars forever. It collapsed because a fixed securitized debt obligation on a depreciating asset doesn't pause just because demand does, which is really the whole business in miniature. A rental car company makes money by successfully predicting two things at once: how many people will need a car and what a used one will be worth when it's time to let it go. Get the first one wrong and you lose a season. Get the second one wrong at scale with borrowed money attached to every vehicle, and you can lose the company.